Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of bluegrass. You've enjoyed live bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hampton, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. So our guest today on Got Grass is Rob Ickes. Rob, as you probably know, is a 15-time IBMA Dobro Player of the Year. He was a co-founder of Blue Highway and played with them for 21 years. Since 2016, he's been touring with guitar whiz Trey Hensley, where the world learned that Rob also has a fine singing voice. So welcome, Rob Ickes, to Got Grass.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
I guess my first question, I know you're busy, is like what you've been up to these days.
Well, a lot of different stuff. I mean, my main priority is definitely the Rob and Trey gig, and that keeps me really busy on a lot of levels. And as you mentioned, I'm singing a lot more now, which is great. And I've always sang some, but more, baritone or lead kind of range. And so singing tenor is new to me, and but I'm really enjoying it. I've always like really paid attention to tenor vocal, like Ricky Skaggs and Del McCurry and Don Rich, who was with Buck Owens for most of his career,
Hmm?
most of his life, really. And so even though I hadn't really done that vocal part, I feel like I've been studying it for a long time, and now I'm just sort of getting to put it into action. So, but yeah, I mean, kind of learning about that and how to do that better has been something that I still work on for sure. And yeah, and just a lot of sessions and probably the coolest record I played on lately was Willie Nelson's Bluegrass album that came out a few months ago, and that was just really fun session. And Trey and I are kind of thinking about the next record and trying to figure out what direction we want to go. We do a lot of different things, which is the fun of the gig and one of the challenges. And when we go to do a record, it's just like wow, because we could play electric or acoustic or bluegrass or some blues or country. So just trying to find 12 songs that fit together well. And so anyway, yeah, a lot of stuff. A
A
lot of
lot, a
stuff.
lot going on, yeah. Yeah. So I've kind of heard the story about how I guess you Blue Highway had Trey come in and do some kind of vocal, and you really thought he was great, and that's how you kind of started together. Is that how it worked?
Yeah. I mean, I met Trey when he was a kid, and I was playing with Earl Scruggs, and Earl was a big fan of Trey's, and I think they had just met a few months previous. And we were playing in Knoxville, and Earl invited Trey to sit in with the band. And this kid comes out on stage and just crushes it. He's probably 12 or something, and but honestly, a lot of kids are good. A lot of kids get into it and get good, and not all of them stick with it. And so probably when he was in his early 20s, he came in and sang a scratch vocal, well, what was supposed to be a scratch vocal on a Blue Highway album. There was one song that we were gonna send to another guest artist, a very well established bluegrass guy. And if you don't know what a scratch vocal is, it's a vocal that is not a keeper. It just guides the musicians so they can play the song. And then we were going to send the instrumental track to the special guest artist, and he was going to put his vocal on there. And so Trey came in and sang the scratch vocal. And he sang the crap out of it. It's a great song written by Tim Stafford and Wayne Taylor, kind of a
Mhm.
coal mining song. And I think that day we were all kind of focused on parts and getting a good track. And then the engineer sent the rough mix the next day. and everybody in the band went, geez, Louise, this kid is a killer singer, you know? And we all went, that nobody's going to sing it any better than what Trey Hensley just did. And so we kept Trey's vocal on there.
Hmm.
And, uh, and so I guess I just was the guy who owned the studio has known Trey forever. And I just said, what's this guy doing? He's amazing. I mean, again, I had met Trey before, but I hadn't seen him in a long time. And it's like he'd really developed into a great artist, and so anyway, so I said, well, if Trey ever needs any help, with his career, I think he's amazing, and so Trey called me a couple days later, and we had a long talk. And he was thinking about moving to Nashville, and I said, well, if you ever do, I'd love to help you get started or whatever. And so I think the next day he called me, and his wife got a nice job offer, and they decided, they were going to move to Nashville. They were going to look for apartments. It was like that quick. I mean, it was literally the next day.
Yeah.
And things just started clicking, and I took him around to a lot of label heads and different producers, and we started playing the station in every month. And I was really just trying to get him going because I was just a fan, especially. And then when I heard him play guitar, I was like, golly, man. Um, and got him hooked up with some good people, but nobody was really taking the reins and doing anything. And so at some point, I just said, hey, man. And we were playing together more, and it was like just everything was clicking, and I was kind of ready to do something else musically. I'd been in Blue Highway for 21 years, and it was a great gig, but I was kind of ready to move on to something else. And I thought, well, I could help Trey get going, and he could help me just sort of keep inspired musically. And that's kind of how we started working together, and we're still working together. So it's been a great gig.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, when you first played with Trey, did you ever think to yourself, oh man, how do I keep up with this guy? I mean, he's a pretty amazing guitar player.
He is, and
Uh,
it's just he's powerful. But that's what's I think I even today, like I still kind of think of it as I'm trying to get him famous. I mean, I love I love giving him the spotlight, I mean, it's just, and that's the way it works best, I think, because he is such a force, I mean, nobody can do what he does, it's really, I mean, technically, he's really amazing on the guitar, and his timing. I mean, it's like playing with Earl Scruggs. I mean, he has this drive and this timing to his playing that I've never heard anybody else come close to.
yeah.
Uh, and then he has so many different styles going, and I'm the same way. I mean, I like lots of different music, and so yeah, but so yes, I mean, I was never intimidated by it, but I just feel like we're a good team because it's not competitive, and I feel like I bring things to it that are different than he brings to it, and they complement each other. So I mean, it's funny you asked that because I just listened to a tape of a recent show, and I was, kind of seeing what I liked and what I didn't like, and I haven't listened to one of our shows in a long time, so it was a good experience, and just thinking about dialing in my singing on some things, and the set list. Oh, maybe we should move that song, or maybe that song doesn't work anymore, and then a lot of good stuff too, obviously. But yeah, it was. I think we complement each other really well. So yeah,
So playing with a duo obviously is different than playing with a five-piece bluegrass band. I mean, you're right out there. There's no place to
no place to
to
hide.
go, no place to get cover. I was just wondering. So dobro and guitar is an interesting mix, probably not that common. Did you have to really work at changing your style of playing to be in a duo setting? besides, singing, but I mean, just the playing to complement
Well,
a guitar, or how would that work?
y- that's one of those things that was interesting too, because when I think back to when I was a kid and I'd go to these festivals and I would want to get like in the biggest jam and just
Hmm.
thrash, with everybody and just get out there. But then in the middle of the night, like I'd be wandering around because I just love playing so much and I love going to festivals and meeting new musicians. And oftentimes I would find somebody, anybody who's still awake at 3 in the morning is really into it. And so I would find some
Uh,
compatriots, I'd find some brothers and sisters out there that were just as excited about playing music as I was. And often it was a guitar player,
uh,
and what I found was that I was so warmed up from thrashing, playing too hard and being in the middle of these big jams that when I got down to just me and a guitar player, my hands were warmed up, my brain was warmed up, and I could play anything I wanted to play. Anything I
mm,
thought of, I could play. And as I've gotten older and experimented with different bands, not just a five-piece bluegrass band, but like, I had this thing Three Ring Circle with Andy Leftwich and Dave Pomeroy, and that was a
right,
trio, and that really opened up my brain like, wow, I can play the low strings once in a while, because in a bluegrass band you're needing volume so often. You play a lot of your stuff on the high strings,
right,
and I was like, wow, I could play rhythm, I could play a bass line, I could learn some bass lines. And then after Three Ring Circle, I started doing a lot with Jim Hurst, and that was a duo, and that
right.
just kept that evolution going. Like, wow, I can play some jazz stuff. I could play some comping that's real, like more like a piano, and wow, I can play these different chords that I would never get the opportunity to play in a bluegrass band. And and then when Trey and I started working together, it just sort of all that experience had an outlet, and it's still a big outlet. That's why, at the beginning of this interview, I said that still fills up. It's my main priority and my main fun thing, that I get to do. So it's a mind blower every night.
Yeah. So you have quite an interesting and effective kind of rhythmic comping or backup style on the dobro that you play. Is that kind of your invention? It seems so you, the way you do that with you that that loose
Well,
strum with your right hand.
yes and no. I mean, I feel like I've definitely got a sound with the way I play rhythm, but I was just talking to somebody about this recently. Adam Steffi, one of the greatest mandolin players ever. When I first moved to Nashville, even before I moved here, I did some stuff with Alison Krauss and Union Station, and I just loved Adam's chop, and there was a simplicity about it, but a grooviness about it that just made you play better. It's like playing with Tony Rice. It's like that rhythm is so constant and on the money that it relaxes you and it lets you play better. I've heard Bela Fleck talk about playing with Tony Rice, and he put a number to it. He said, playing with Tony, he would make you play 35% better than normal, which
Yeah,
cracked me up that he would put a number to it. But so anyway, so I think before that I was really, I mean, I was doing a chop like that, but more syncopated and kind of flashy. And Adam Steffi was so tasteful, and it was like a snare drum, and it was so consistent. And I realized the value in that. And so I feel like I really stole it from him more than anybody else. Of course, I love Sam Bush, mandolin players in general, but I guess if I really had to pick one that really turned my brain on to the idea, the concept of playing a nice steady chop that sounded good, it would be Adam Steffi.
yeah, yeah. I'm like you probably are a big jazz fan. We have a local venue. Actually, I think you've played there. Best Video. I think you played there with Trey once
Oh
at the
yeah.
video store, and they have a once a month jazz night. So they have this kind of crazy drummer from New York that comes up and plays, and he's all over the place. And I just want to go up and say to him, listen, just keep the beat. I mean, it's fun to be inventive, and he's doing things with the sticks on the cymbals and under the cymbals and all this crazy stuff. And I hear what you're saying. I mean, sometimes the simplest rhythm that keeps the rhythm and keeps the groove is by far the most effective in any kind of music.
It is. It is. And there's a time to strut your stuff and there's a time to support the song and knowing that not everybody knows the difference. So knowing that is good and I think about Tony Rice again and I always thought he was like a clock but a soulful clock, if that makes sense. He when he was on a record, you knew it, even if he wasn't in the mix, even if it was somebody else's record. I can just tell when he is in the room because there's a clockness to it, the timekeeping that frames the whole piece. It frames everybody else's playing, and so that's really special and rare. And because he had fun with time and he would push the beat and he would do this thing where he would get to the five chord before anybody else and it
Uh-huh.
it worked. And so he would play with time, but the clock was always ticking in a good way, and he would play around within that clock, I think.
Yeah.
Really amazing. And then what he did with JD Crowe, he just like got inside JD Crowe's brain, and played what JD was gonna play, with him exactly. And that was really like a mind meld. Like I've never heard two other musicians do that. It's just the more I older I get, the more I really appreciate how rare and beautiful a thing that was.
Hmm. Yeah, I've often talked about this with other people and musicians and people about bluegrass, that everybody who played with Tony Rice, and I guess maybe Bella's 35% or 30% better. I've always thought that everybody who played with Tony played their very best they ever played in their careers when they played with him. I don't
Oh
know.
yeah,
I
I would
just
agree.
have
And
that feeling.
I say that all the time, Chris. We all do, like musicians of my generation, we're playing because of Tony Rice. It's because his records were so fascinating. The level of perfection, but again, it's a soulful perfection. It's not a computerized algorithm perfection. And that's what we all strive for. And Merle Haggard had that too. He would make these records that were just perfect, but not in a stiff or stale way. And I think that's what we're all striving for, and that's why we continue to put Tony on that pedestal.
Yeah. I remember our first concert that I ever did at the Little Theater in New Haven in 2008. It was the Tony Rice Unit, all instrumental. So it was Tony Wyatt, Ricky Simpkins, Bryn Davies was playing bass, and you were playing dobro. And I remember I was very nervous because it was an afternoon show and Tony hadn't showed up. And somebody had warned me that he might not show up and you might be making a big mistake with this first concert.
Oh wow, love it.
I heard that. I might have been someone like Jimmy Goudreau. I don't even know, but I heard this. I got this advice like, do not be careful. But he and Wyatt showed up in that black Ford pickup truck. They swooped in.
Oh
I'm sure
yeah.
you were already there, and they skidded in, and they had the guitars in the back of the truck underneath the tonneau cover. And man, that was quite a moment. I'll never forget that.
Well,
Uh,
Tony was famous, and I learned this. Yeah, he wouldn't show up till literally sometimes like 5 minutes before showtime. And then we laugh because we say he'd be loading up his truck while the last note was still ringing out. And
yeah.
he was I mean, I worked with him, for at least 10 years probably, and we never, well, not never, but we very rarely got the chance to really hang, and because he was in and out, and one of my favorite stories, Josh Williams played with us a lot there towards the end, and one day we were talking, and he said, "I just wish we would rehearse a little bit or work up some songs." it's just like we just show up and jam, and I'm like, dude, that's what's so great about this gig. There's no rehearsals, and you play with Tony Rice, and you play all these great songs, and you're playing with Tony, and so I we used to just joke about that, but that's another thing. That's why those records that Tony made are so cool, because he didn't beat it to death. It was, you hear the inspiration. A lot of the stuff you're hearing is first take,
Mhm.
and he was able, well, he surrounded himself with great musicians, and he inspired greatness. I guess that's the simplest way to put it. He brought the best out of other people. But you can just think, talking about the records, and the mixes are so great, which is another rare thing, and I noticed this even as a kid. His records weren't like solo albums, they were like band records. And what I mean by that is, it wasn't like guitar was kicking off every song. It wasn't like guitar was louder than everybody else. Like you buy a country album, and it's like that lead vocal is going to be always going to be the loudest thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Tony's record were more democratic, I guess is a word, but just artistically just cool. It wasn't all about him. It was about the team and the whole thing. And again, that's just rare, and real special. And he had, Bill Wolf was just a genius, and engineered and mixed all those records. So a lot of credit goes to him. But I think Tony wasn't even there, so a lot of times, for mixing. He just I don't know why, but he's just busy doing other stuff. But I think that helped, because he wasn't Bill did such a great job that Tony probably just gave it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and but anyway, yeah, really important guy in our music.
I one of the first podcast interviews I did was with Doyle Lawson. We were talking about the Bluegrass Album Band, and he was saying, yeah, Tony didn't really want to solo on any of those songs, and they kind of made
Yeah.
him do it because he said, "This is really not about me. This is about the music." But
Yep.
he said, yeah, there was always a thing with Tony. Yeah, you got to take a solo. They want you to take a solo. You have to take a solo. And he said, I don't. That's not really where I want to do, but he did. He
Well,
did.
and he captured the spirit of early bluegrass on those bluegrass album bands,
Yeah.
just they just sat in the room, and no overdubs, and so he had a lot of, when you really dig down into it, there's a lot of philosophy, and a lot of, he's a big jazz fan. He loved Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and really knew the importance of improvisation, and not beating things to death, not playing memorized solos, and being capturing the moment, and that was from his listening to jazz and bluegrass, lots of stuff, but he just really knew the importance of capturing the moment of inspiration.
Yeah. I remember being the promoter, I didn't really have much chance to talk to anybody either because I was too busy like cleaning up and paying the band.
Hmm.
It's kind of a myth that you just get to sit and hang out with musicians when you're promoting concerts because you don't have much time for that. But I remember talking to Tony at that show, and he was talking about Oscar Peterson, who happens to be my favorite jazz pianist, and I realized that I think Tony's playing style and Oscar Peterson's have something in common in that they both have a vocabulary which is very unique to them, and as soon as you hear one note, you know it's them, and they
Hmm.
have certain stock, phrases and licks and things that are part of their solos all the time, but yet everything is always so unique and spontaneous.
That is a brilliant deduction there. Yeah, that you are exactly right. And I know Bill Evans, another piano player who was a big influence on Tony. And Tony wasn't the kind of guy to like learn a Miles Davis solo, or learn, a John Coltrane solo note for note, but he listened to it really deeply, and it came out in his playing in other ways, like his time, his time, his concern. Obviously time is very important to him, and tone and clarity, and he got that, from listening to Miles Davis, and these jazz guys, amongst other musicians.
Mm,
So I think sometimes people are surprised when they find out that he was such a jazz aficionado, but it makes perfect sense to me, you know.
yeah,
He took that and brought it into bluegrass. You know, it wasn't there before to that level. And
right.
he took that soul and that clarity and that rhythm and brought it into bluegrass somehow, you know. So that's just one of the things he did.
Yeah. I know he was famous for many things. One was, I think, he just, here's the gig, meet you there. No rehearsing, no set list. He would never do sound check, apparently, because he didn't at any of our shows. He would just come out there for the first song, and his guitar would be feeding back, and the sound guy would be going, holy mackerel, what do we do with this? And I guess
Yes.
that's just the way he did it. I remember, I think I remember hearing you backstage at a show learning Miles Davis all blues maybe.
Hmm.
And was it stressful for you playing with him on songs that you didn't know or didn't hadn't rehearsed at all or
Well, that's the nice thing is that you know, if you play this music, you know everything Tony Rice ever did.
right?
So I knew all those songs, most of them. I mean, there were ones like My Favorite Things, you know, which I'd never played before. So that one was a bit of a challenge at first. And but no, most of the songs I knew. I mean, I grew up, I mean, I studied his music. I majored in Tony Rice, you know.
Yeah, right.
But especially the first few gigs were very intimidating because that's Tony Rice, you know, and but he was always supportive, and the fact that he liked my playing, you know, meant a lot to me, and he knew, you know, he really like I've done several kind of jazz albums, and he really liked those records, and he
Yeah,
often spoke of them to me, and so I think we shared that, you know, and I think he liked that I have my own style, you know. And it was just, but yeah, I remember it as IBMA one year, and he came up and just said, you know, I'd love for you to play the unit anytime, any place. You have an
oh
open invitation to play with the unit.
uh,
And I was like, oh, okay, I'll be there, man. So I made it every gig I could, you know, and it was just great. And I gotta say, he always paid us really well, you know. I mean, I've worked with a lot bigger names who didn't pay close to what he paid.
yeah,
He was very, very generous with paying the musicians in his group, and you know, he respected musicians, you know, and he always dressed nice. He thought that was real important, you know, and but he respected. He knew, and Earl Scruggs was like this too. I mean, I worked with Earl Scruggs a lot, and Earl was all about the team. You know, it was not about Earl Scruggs. He was about getting everybody on the same page and making sure. He would always say, "Is your room okay? You know, you get in okay? Your flight okay?"
yeah,
Very concerned about everybody else in the band. Definitely a team player, and Tony was like that too.
yeah. So he you saw him at IBMA and he just said you want come play with us and did. That's basically how it started.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was about that short of a conversation.
Yeah, right, right. So then at some point, Josh Williams did join the band and started singing all of the songs. And so you kept on playing with Tony a while after that, correct? After Josh joined?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
played with him till he stopped playing shows. You know, I remember the last show where he didn't show up,
Hmm.
and then that was, I think he made maybe one more public appearance after that. But yeah, yeah, and it was great when Josh came in because we could do those vocal songs. You know.
Right. So I'm not going to go back too far in musical memory time with you. I know you grew up in the West Coast. Did you ever consider playing another instrument besides the dobro, or were you just hooked on dobro from the first time you heard it?
Hooked on Dobro the first time I heard it, man. Just blew me away, and I started playing that day, and here I am, you know, still playing. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, my family played a lot of music, and so I was kind of felt like I was primed for it, but I wasn't. I remember starting to, when I was 11, 12, starting to really listen to records closely, just like really just put the headphones on and space out. And, you know, even just like the James Bond theme, my dad had a record of movie themes, and it's like I love that guitar sound. And listening to, the Eagles, Hotel California, my dad loved that record. And but just listening really closely to music. And then and my brother started playing banjo, and so he brought home Jimmy Martin Good and Country and Foggy Mountain Banjo. And Foggy Mountain Banjo was just like, wow, I mean, and I kind of heard the Dobro on there, and I was like, oh, that's cool, but I didn't really know what it was. And then not too long after that, I heard a tape of Mike Aldridge's first album, and that just blew me away. And that's when I started playing dobro, was when I heard Mike Aldridge in the Seldom Scene.
Yeah. So he was kind of your first real Dobro hero, I guess you'd put it.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I mean, I got upset. You get older and you realize how gonzo nuts you are about this stuff, and you just obsess. You have to be obsessive about music to get good at it. And I just, that's all I wanted to do, was listen to Mike Aldridge and the Seldom Scene. So
Mm.
I'd listen to them 24/7, and learned every note on those records. Just playing by ear. And once I could pick stuff off records, I never looked at tablature again. I mean, I definitely had some tablature when I first started, but yeah, even now, I know we just lost Ben Eldridge a few days ago, great
Yeah.
banjo player with the Seldom Scene. And those guys had something so special, and it was different, than Tony Rice's music. And it wasn't as rhythmically kind of tight, but they got on the same wavelength, even if it didn't pound you over the head with the rhythm like some later bluegrass did. Their vocal trio had an amazing rhythm to it. And they just did so many things so well. And it's just a great, crazy combination of people that you could never have thrown together. And so very, very unique. And I treasure them more, now. I mean, I always have, but just been thinking about them a lot lately. I just did a Mike Aldridge course for my teaching website, and so digging back into his early stuff and the Seldom Scene, and it just hits me all over again. Like when I was a kid, it just blew my mind and still blows my mind.
Mm. Are you still learning how to play the dobro?
Oh, more than ever, man. I learned now. I've recently learned about the right hand. I've been so focused on the left hand of the instrument, and realized a few years ago that, wow, I could, there's room for improvement here on the right hand technique also. And so that's been a big focus of mine for several years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I always would play good stuff, but and it was always different, which is cool. But I don't know. I just felt like I didn't have control over my right hand technique like I wanted. And I mean, I don't want to control it 100%, but there was some things going on that could be improved. I guess I'll put it that way. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm excited because I'm, seeing a lot of improvement lately, and it's been a lot of time invested in it, but it's really starting to see it pay off. So now I'm even more excited about everything.
Yeah. So are there any particular thing you're working on your right hand that you could like throw out there to all of our listeners who are dobro players or
Well, a big thing, I think it was over COVID. I just, I started a teaching website about a year before COVID. And you know, I just realized that I don't know how to practice. And I'm being facetious a little bit, but I grew up playing at festivals and jamming and doing it, like I started improvising really early on, and seemed to be able to put the right stuff together, but I didn't know how I did it. Or when you start real young, I think you get older and it's like you just do it. And so over COVID, again, having my teaching website it brought out the fact that, well, what do I teach? I can't just say, well, go out and play, you know? So I really, and I've taught before, so I mean, I've broken things down, but I just read a bunch of books on practicing and learned about playing super. That kind of brought out a lot of problems, honestly, like just when you're, I've heard it described as when you're driving down the freeway, you can't work on your car, you got to pull it over
Right.
to the side of the road, and then you can address some issues. And I have been driving on the freeway for my whole life. And so when I pulled over to the side of the road, I was like, okay, yeah, need a tune up here. And so playing just kind of like changing bad habits, and it's just about these little muscle things, these micro muscles.
Yeah.
And playing on the freeway, so to speak, you just sometimes you're just trying to survive, and so just kind of breaking down my playing and putting it back together again, I guess I'd say. But yeah, playing super slow has
Hmm.
been just a mind blower, and takes a lot of discipline. It takes a you just it's depressing. You just go like, wow, that really needs some tightening up, or some loosening up, really,
Hmm.
muscle wise. But yeah, so I think so yeah, I would recommend really super slowing things down and focusing on little things. I used to just kind of play a song top to bottom. That was like my practice routine. And there's a lot of good you can get out of that. But now I would also just sort of like just play through these mistakes and just memorize these mistakes. You know what I mean? And now if I hear a mistake, I stop and I pull over to the side of the road, so to speak, and I say, what's going on here? And I
Yeah.
investigate the problem and pick it apart. And the good thing is when I first started doing this, I just thought, I don't know if I can fix this, this might just be the way I play.
Hmm.
And but through a lot of time and again slowing things down, I'm starting to see it pay off, so
Yeah.
you can change, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but I'm really excited that I've been able to, improve things and change things for the better. So, but it takes a lot. I've been playing for a long time, so it's not a overnight fix, but music's not an overnight thing.
Right. Right. I mean, I always felt that playing stuff slowly was the best way to practice, even if it's a fiddle tune. I mean, I know I love Tony Rice and I play a little guitar and I used to always try to play like Tony Rice. And I realized I never could, I never would. And then when I started playing these fiddle tunes really slowly, I realized, hey, this is a cool melody. You could even play it slowly as a, in a jam, you could play a fiddle tune really slowly and get all kinds of
Yeah.
interesting new stuff out of it that you wouldn't get at breakneck speed. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
for sure. For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, just the whole art of practicing is great, and it's funny, I'd always heard like people like Chris Thiele or Edgar Meyer talk about, or I'd hear that they would practice super slow, and I would kind of fool with it, but I don't know, it just didn't make sense, but it finally clicked for me, a few years
Yeah.
ago. I think it's just not just playing slow, but then like another thing is stopping right before you have a problem. Like let's say you're playing a fiddle tune or whatever, and you always screw up the fifth note. You just always you've learned it wrong, and so the way you unlearn that is you play up to the fourth note and you stop,
Hmm.
and then you're sort of like deleting the bad muscle memory. And when I first kind of read about this, I kind of had my doubts, but it works, man. It really, really works. And so that's been a big one too. It's just like trying to delete these mistakes or just these weird errors, that are
Hmm.
happening.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean it's exciting to keep learning a bunch of stuff.
I just had an interview with Jason Carter, from Del McCoury Band, and he was saying something similar to what you're saying. He grew up. He played a lot of mandolin, so he said when I went to fiddle, the left hand was easy. I knew where all the notes were. But he said, I still don't know how to play with my right hand at all. I don't know how to bow. I tried teaching. I don't know how to teach it. I don't even know how I play. He said, I just play. And I never thought about how to show somebody else what they're doing right or wrong because I don't really know.
Well,
That was
and
funny.
it's like and see, he started on the job training because he had just picked up the fiddle. He told me this himself not too long ago. He was young and a huge Del McCoury fan, and yeah, I think he was playing guitar at that point, and mandolin, and he's like, man, I really want to play with the Del McCoury band someday. And his dad's like, well, his boys, one of them plays mandolin and Del plays guitar, so and then the other one plays banjo. So why don't you get a fiddle? And so that's why he started playing fiddle, because he wanted to play with Del McCoury. And he went and auditioned. He hadn't been playing fiddle very long, and I don't think he says he didn't play very well, but they knew that he had the spirit and the attitude, to persevere. And of course, he's still there, and he's turned into one of the best fiddle players on the planet. So, but I get what he's saying when he's like, I was the same way. I just was playing in bands and never really sat down and figured out what I was doing. I just started doing it. And yeah, sometimes you have technique things that need working on. So yeah, I think a lot of us are like that.
Mhm. Getting back to your duo with Trey, so you knew about singing, but you hadn't really done that much upfront singing before, right? I mean, you sang with
Well,
Blue
I
Highway.
sang I sang a lead on a few of my solo albums, just a few songs. And then I would sing harmony on maybe the gospel things, or just a couple things, because we had so many great singers in Blue Highway. I
Yeah,
didn't want to sing, those guys were real singers, and I was happy just playing Dobro primarily. And then when Trey and I started playing together, it was just like I didn't even know I could really sing tenor. And then it's nice because Trey sings in a lower than your typical bluegrass range. And so I remember one of our first gigs, we did Silver Wings, a Merle Haggard song.
yeah,
And backstage, I was like, let me see if I can hit the tenor on that. It was like, yeah, no problem. So then I was like, wow, maybe I could do this more. I didn't really sing with the duo much when we started. It was just all Trey singing lead. And
yeah. I
then
remember.
and whenever I did, people always said, "Hey, that really adds a lot, blah blah blah." And so I started working on it more, and this last record we did, singing, almost all the tenor parts on there. So yeah, that was fun. That was a challenge, but yeah, I like how it came out.
I was talking to Phil Rosenthal, who's a lived near me in Connecticut and was a singer for Seldom Seen for 9 years. You probably
Oh
know.
yeah, no Phil,
And
yeah.
so we had a little local band together for a while before COVID. And so Phil would sing a lot of lead, but because he has a low voice, I found singing the tenor part was so easy with him because I don't have a high, I can't sing bluegrass tenor at all.
Hmm.
But with him, with his lower lead voice, it just like fell into place. I was like, oh my God, this is so fun singing with someone like this because I can actually do it, you know?
Yes, that's how it was with Trey and I. It was sort of like an eye opener that, okay, yeah, well, maybe I can do this.
So when you decided to leave Blue Highway, was that, I imagine that was a tough decision for you, or were you just ready to move on?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. It wasn't tough because I was ready to move on, but it was tough because these are my brothers, I mean, 21 years. And also, honestly, just the reality, there's not a lot of great dobro gigs out there. I
Yep.
didn't want to just play with anybody, and and it just sort of fell into place with Trey, and so yeah, I mean, in some ways it was easy, in some ways it was difficult. It's just such a crazy biz, and the dobro is such an obscure instrument. It's not like if I played bass or drums or something, every band needs a bass player. not
Sure.
every band needs or has a dobro player. And again, like I said, I knew enough about songs and making records and stuff that I didn't want to just be a side person, you know. I mean, I don't really think of myself as like I gotta have the spotlight or anything, but I think musically I like having a say in the direction, and I had a lot to say in Blue Highway, I think, you know, as far as yeah, arrangements and you know, songs and stuff and recording and blah blah blah. But
Yeah.
so I felt like I had a lot to say and a lot to contribute to something. And then yeah, I just got lucky and Trey and I just kind of found each other, you know.
Hmm. When you listen to your recordings with Trey or even just playing live with him, are you surprised at how well your voices blend? Are you impressed? How do you feel about that? About the
Yeah, I
singing?
mean, it's getting better all the time. When we did that last record, I was pleasantly surprised because it's like the first time you go in the studio on your when you're an instrumentalist, it's sort of cool and it's sort of like ouch, you know, because you're just under the microscope, just mentally like hearing yourself played back over the speakers is daunting, you know. And so I feel like I went back there, you know, when I started singing and again, especially on the last record, because that's the first record I really sang tenor on, you know, and but you know, when I remember listening to Way Downtown, you know, after we cut it and I was like, damn, that's kind of like a brother duet style, you know. Got a nice kind of brother harmony going on that
Yes.
one. And
Yes.
there's a couple songs on that record where I feel like we got that you know, kind of Louvin Brothers or, you know, that buzzy kind of duet sound going. And it's gotten a lot better since then, you know. So yeah, and even just, you know, singing and playing rhythm at the same time is new to me, you know, so I'm still figuring that out. And but it's getting easier all the time and it's feeling pretty good these days actually.
Hmm. I know a lot of musicians hate the sound of their own voice. Even big time musicians say, "Oh, I just can't stand hearing myself recorded." But it's just the way I sound, and I'm not going to worry about it. But I don't think too many people really love their vocals when they hear them recorded. I don't know.
Well, yeah, John Lennon famously, you know, he hated the sound of his voice and he would on the later records, he would always have them put effect, reverb or you know, put me in a tunnel or put me underwater. Did not like the sound of his voice, you know.
Right.
So yeah, and I think your voice is even worse than your instrument as far as how it affects you, you know, psychologically, you know, it's your soul, your hearing, you know. So it's hard
Mm,
to be impartial, you know.
right.
So there's a lot of potential baggage coming along when you hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about the state of country music these days? Like, what's your I mean, there's a lot of controversy about all kinds of things in country music. These young country bro guys with their baseball caps are superstars, and then you've got Beyonce jumping in. You've got all kinds of stuff in country music. It's changed quite a lot over the last 15 years. Any
I don't
thoughts on
know.
that?
I was talking to somebody recently and it's just always had its crappy side, you know, like when I was a kid, you know, you had oh God, I hate to name names because people, you know,
It's
some
okay. You don't have
people.
to name names. They'll know who you're talking about,
Yeah, you
probably.
know, the early '80s country was like, seriously, man, you know, and so it's country has a long history. Even going back to Chet Atkins, bringing in, you know, smoothing it out and bringing in the strings and the pop sounds. You know, they wanted to sell records, and so wow, let's do like Sinatra kind of country style because they wanted to make more money. They wanted, you know, maybe you probably wanted to, you know, have people take Nashville more seriously, and of course sell more records. I mean, Chet worked for RCA, you know, so they were in the record biz, and it worked, you know. I mean, brought a lot of more money into town, you know, for sure. And but you know, it goes back and forth. I mean, then you know, I'm talking about the early '80s, and then you had you know the Judds and Ricky Skaggs come along, and then they tweaked it more towards traditional country.
Yeah.
And then whatever Garth Brooks did, I don't know, whatever you want to call
Well,
that.
it's funny.
I used to hate that, and then now it's like, oh, that's traditional country is Garth Brooks,
I just wrote down with my pen on my pad here, Garth Brooks question mark. Like some people say Garth Brooks ruined country music. Other people say, wow, he made it huge, big time, popular. So I guess maybe
Yeah.
both things might be true. I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, when it first came out, I didn't like it at all, And then now I hear it, it's like, wow, it's a lot better than what's going on today.
Yeah, I know.
But honestly, I'm very ignorant about what's going on in country music today. But and again, and I guess kind of like I was saying, then you had Ricky Skaggs and the Judds. I mean, now you have Chris Stapleton and you got Sturgill Simpson
Hmm.
and what's his name? Ty the guy from Kentucky.
I
Uh,
think I know who you mean, but I can't think either.
oh, Tyler Childers.
Oh,
Tyler
Tyler. Yeah,
Childers.
yeah, yep.
And those guys are totally coming out of left field and doing their own thing, and then they've sold. They're doing great. It's probably just the same thing that's been happening in country music for a long time. I don't know.
I
I
guess
don't really follow it enough to really give a good answer.
it's probably true in all genres of music. I mean, it goes up and down, it comes and goes, styles
Well,
come that nobody can stand, and then 20 years later you look back on Garth Brooks and say, wow, I have nostalgia for those times. That was real
yes.
country.
And I will say, I mean, I love that Beyonce has done a quote country album. It doesn't sound very country to me, but hey, that one
No,
song's got clawhammer banjo all over it, and how cool
right.
is that? And we play Trey and I have played with Taj Mahal a lot, and I noticed that he put a big shout out to her on his Instagram page a few weeks ago, because he just loves old time music and he's like a musicologist, he knows all about bluegrass and African music and Caribbean and
Yeah.
so anyway, it's cool that she's dipping into, more of a roots music kind of thing. And Robert Randolph played some pedal steel, and there's another guy in town, Jason Shupper or something. Great pedal steel player, and he's on some of that record also. So so I think it's great, and I think I kind of wonder if she's brilliant. It's like let me release this record during the Super Bowl, and then also I think trying to steal some of Taylor Swift's thunder, maybe, or just get a piece of that
Hmm.
thunder. And so I think it's pretty brilliant on a lot of levels. But the record to me is kind of a lot of it is just like a lot of pop music. I just call it lead vocal and a laptop. It's just sort of like some beats
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
some great singing on top of it. But I like when there's six people in a room together playing something. I just think it's got a lot more mojo. So it's a great record, but it doesn't. It's not. It's not. I like to hear people playing music together at the same time.
Right.
I don't hear that in that record. Maybe they did. I don't know. But
Well,
anyway,
maybe
that's
she'll call you and want some Dobro on her next record. Who knows?
yeah. I don't want to slam it too hard because if she calls, I go, yeah,
I'll,
yes.
I'll be there. So Rob, is there anybody in the history of music that you would have enjoyed playing with that you didn't ever get a chance to, either past or I guess in the past? Any
Oh
like,
yeah, for sure. I mean, all my heroes are dead pretty much now, so
yeah,
we could
right.
talk about a lot of people, but like Django Reinhardt pops into my mind. Lefty Frizzell, Ray Charles for sure. Like, wow, I
Mm,
never even got to see him. I never had a chance to see him live, and I think he is one of the most important people in American music. That's kind of a no-brainer. And Eric Clapton he's still around, but would like to do something with him at some
hmm.
point. Huge fan. Bonnie Raitt. I guess I'm talking about living people now, but another very important artist to me in American music. And I gotta say, gotta pinch myself. I got to play with Earl Scruggs and Tony Rice, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson. There's people that I have got to play with that I never ever thought the opportunity would come. So it's I can't complain. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of musicians, but I guess I don't really dwell on it too much because I have been able to work with a lot of my heroes.
Yeah, right. How do you balance out performing and touring and teaching with family life these days? Are you a lot more selective about your time than you were, say, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was talking about, like Jason Carter and I just kind of learn by doing. And I think when you get older, I've definitely gotten better with my time, like figuring out what to do with my time and planning ahead a little more, and like, okay, you better practice today because this next week you're going to be traveling or on stage or whatever. And so yeah, I've learned to really, really respect those moments when you can practice or just, have work on stuff because it's again just starting to learn how to practice. Now I'm really excited because I kind of know how to move forward quicker, and so now I really want to now I really want to practice. So yeah, practicing is a big priority for me right now.
Yeah.
And um and now my kids are older, so they're 21 and 23. So one of them lives
Wow.
up in Providence, Rhode Island, and the
Huh.
other one's still here at home. But we don't have to change the diapers anymore. So I feel like they're more
Uh,
independent, and it's not about them, it's about me just letting myself practice or letting myself spend time on music stuff. Again, you're just so concerned with paying the bills and working and taking everything that comes in. I do say no a little bit more now, I used to never say no, and now I am able to say no to some stuff once in a while, so that's fun.
yeah. I mean, I guess if you love to play and somebody calls you and says, "Do you want to play?" You're probably going to say yes. I mean, that's what you like to do, right?
Well, it's funny, yeah, when you're a session player, I mean, sometimes I complain or this wasn't a good session or but you never know, sometimes you get someone calls you, hey, can you do this thing on Friday? And you're like, okay, cool, I'll see you there. And you don't know who it is or what it is. And it's like, wow, this was great, or even, I mentioned that Willie Nelson album. I didn't know what that was gonna be like, and it could have been not good, and it turned out to me it's a great record. I mean, I love that record. It's one of the favorite things I've ever played on.
Mm,
And but it could have been horrible. But they got the right musicians, and the right songs. They're all Willie songs, and they all lent themselves well to that instrumentation. But it could have been a train wreck, but it was well planned and well thought out. So
yeah,
you never
yeah.
know. Even sometimes you think it's going to be freaking great, and it does not. So yeah, so you just usually just say, yeah, I'll be there, because if somebody wants to pay me to play dobro, I will. That's all good.
That's what I do. Yeah. So we're getting close to an hour here, and I want to just ask one non-musical question, which some people seem to have trouble with, but what would people be surprised to learn about you in a non-musical sense?
Oh, well, I don't know. I guess I have a degree in biology, so that's something maybe people wouldn't expect. And I do I do read a lot of biology stuff kind of on the side. And I like paleontology and you know uh, evolutionary biology and reading this book about the past, the geologic history of the planet and just all this mind-blowing stuff about what was here before us, and just like it just blows my mind. So I try to blow my mind as often as possible with music or
Uh,
other stuff.
that's a good philosophy in life, I guess. Try to blow your mind as much as possible.
Yeah, at
Do you
least
ever do you
once a
ever do
day.
any archaeological digs, that kind of stuff? Or,
No,
no?
I remember when I was in college, there was a cool company. I forget what it was called. Wasn't Earthworks, but Earth something. And you could go kind of like take a vacation, but you would help out on, a dig or different biology things. You might count elk, or you might help build a trail, but you do some kind of science thing, and you'd work with a grad student or whatever. And I was that would be fun. That would be great.
Yeah.
But I never have. I mean, I did some of that when I was in college. I did some field work, some wildlife biology stuff. But nah, I just been playing music since then. No time for stuff like that. So I
Yeah,
read about
right.
it.
Right, right. Well, I just want to thank you, Rob. Rob Ickes has been talking to us for an hour here. Took some time from his busy schedule. We've covered a lot of topics here, and I think people will really enjoy hearing what you had to say about all these things. These conversations all go in different directions than I ever planned, but it was a good one, and I just want to wish you good luck, and I hope to see you back here sometime at Guitar Town, either with Trey or whatever project you're on. I'd love to see you again.
Hey, sounds great, and it's always been a pleasure. And I remember that first Tony show when we met, and I've always enjoyed your passion for the music and everything that you've done for bluegrass music and acoustic music. And I'm thrilled you're doing this podcast, man. Good for you.
Thanks. This has been a lot of fun. So hope to see you again soon. And thanks again, Rob.
All right, take care.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.